what's the secret behind Rolex's rise to global dominance? Was it their exceptional craftsmanship, or perhaps something more elusive? According to Swiss historian Pierre Yves Donzé, the answer lies in the company's masterful marketing. But how did Rolex maintain such a low profile while becoming an iconic brand? And what challenges did competitors like Omega and Longines face during the same period? Dive into this fascinating story of resilience, secrecy, and success as we explore how Rolex carved its path to the top. Rolex is more than just a watchmaker, it's a legend. Join us as we unravel the remarkable journey of this timeless brand. What was the method by which Rolex achieved global dominance? Skillful marketing was the primary factor, according to a recent publication. The author, Swiss historian Pierre Yves Donzé, asserts that the company's customary policy of maintaining a low profile regarding its internal operations exacerbated the difficulty of this task in documenting this success story. Rolex acquired a downtown New York building for $15 million, 13.7 million Swiss francs in 1977, during a period of crisis in the watchmaking industry. Rolex remained steadfast in its vision of the future despite the challenges faced by competitors such as Omega and Longines when operating outside of the time dimension. Swiss historian Pierre Yves Donzé was intrigued by the Rolex phenomenon. He was interested in understanding the specific factors that enabled the company to surpass its competitors. He is a professor of economic history at the University of Osaka in Japan. The timepiece industry is his area of expertise. The clandestine stance of Rolex itself was the primary issue for Donzé from the outset. Researchers and other external parties are prohibited from accessing the organization's archives. It is not listed on the stock exchange and does not disclose its history. There are no official accounts of the company's history or official museum. It does not even commemorate anniversaries. Thus, the historian asserts in his book, La Fabrique de l'Excellence, The Factory of Excellence, that Rolex has no history, for the brand itself is timeless. It is a myth with a quasi-religious halo surrounding it and operates wholly outside the time dimension. Donzé initiated his investigation in 2019. Rolex did not grant him access to its history. However, this did not deter his inquiries. Conversely, he enjoys drawing comparisons between his research and the study of medieval history. Occasionally, there are only one or two manuscripts that can be consulted, he explains. In light of this circumstance, Donzé was compelled to utilize secondary sources. These consisted of outdated company registers and documents from industry associations or trade unions. He was required to conduct an extensive search of the archives of cantonal and federal authorities, as well as corporations. It necessitated a significant amount of time and travel to access these sources. In all of this meticulous labor, Donzé discerns a positive aspect. The process allows for the development of the situation, he asserts. History that is predicated on a founding myth. The founding myth of Rolex, as recounted by marketing managers and reenacted by aficionados in articles and blogs, is predicated on the brilliance of an entrepreneur who was also an extraordinary inventor. Hans Wilsdorf, 1881 to 1961, the proprietor of the company, was orphaned at the age of 12 and sold watches in England as a young man. He aspired to create a waterproof timepiece. The period between the conflicts was critical in the acceptance of wristwatches. These new timepieces were susceptible to mechanical strain, moisture, and grime, in contrast to conventional pocket watches. Wilsdorf created the Oyster in 1926. It is a remarkable narrative, but it is so succinct that it appears beyond belief. Donzé shares this perspective. He contends that the concept of a waterproof timepiece had been in existence for decades. Additionally, Rolex had not concluded on a specific product, and the Oyster was merely one of numerous models. They subsequently transformed Hans Wilsdorf into a version of Steve Jobs, Donzé explains. The future proprietor of a watch company was depicted as a solitary genius who one day stood up and declared, "I am going to create a waterproof automatic watch." In 1926, an initial advertisement for the impermeable Rolex Oyster was created. Rolex.org. Rolex was, in fact, a mid-sized company that pursued the same strategies as its competitors to establish a presence in the Swiss watch industry until the 1950s. The company prioritized precision and quality. The saga assumes legendary proportions. Under André Heiniger, the company's successor to Hans Wilsdorf, the Rolex saga only reached legendary proportions in the 1960s. He employed the services of J. Walter Thompson Juichi, an American advertising agency. This was a critical connection between Geneva and New York, according to Donzé. Without question, Rolex has consistently manufactured exceptional watches. However, that alone is insufficient to confer the prestige of excellence. Rolex led Omega, Longines, and Zenith, participated in chronometry competitions. Each of these manufacturers was striving to develop the most precise wristwatch. However, this qualification alone was insufficient to elevate an organization to the status of a legend. The Donzé's expertly executed communication was instrumental in elevating Rolex to the status of an icon. The Swiss luxury brand's identity has been based on a three-pronged message since the 1950s. Extraordinary watches created by an extraordinary individual for extraordinary people. The wrists of prominent politicians, athletes, and business people who were the champions of their era now glisten with Rolex watches. The brand primarily embodies masculine values. In his book, Donzé asserts that it is indicative of the self-perception of the upper-middle-class white male during periods of economic expansion. When you are the market leader, there is no necessity for innovation. Rolex had discovered the secret to success. The brand was no longer required to be innovative. What is the reason for this? It preserved its current collections and elevated them to iconic status. Rolex has maintained a competitive edge over its competitors and its consumer base. It could be certain of its position in the sun for years to come. Other manufacturers have engaged in a competitive effort to secure a portion of the market. They attempted to mass-produce quartz timepieces. Buyers responded favorably to the swatch. Others have effectively revitalized once-renowned brands. However, Rolex maintained its status as the industry's undisputed leader. The historian asserts that it requires a certain degree of cheat to assert that innovation is unnecessary due to the discovery of the philosopher's stone. Donzé also notes that Rolex, the enigmatic brand, has not always maintained a low profile. Corporate history was not a topic of interest 50 years ago. Companies only began to investigate their histories in the 1980s and 1990s. This led to the establishment of the first corporate collections and museums, but not at Rolex. Rolex is consistently the protagonist of the narrative. Donzé is acutely aware of the potential for historical research to detract from the enchantment of a narrative. This is the case with the Rolex empire. Anyone who examines a success story elucidates processes that can debunk a myth, he writes. His perspective on Rolex was altered by his 4-year research endeavor. I now have a more comprehensive understanding of what appears to be completely incomprehensible to outsiders, he asserts, adding that the company is a highly instructive case study for a business school seminar. He is astounded by how successive company executives were content to remain in the shadow of the brand, adhering to the axiom that the hero of the story is always Rolex. According to Donzé, the company's previous publications have been excessively similar to watch catalogs. Little attention was given to the individuals and their labor that occurred in the background. Rolex is not merely an industrial empire, but a financial one, and Donzé is eager to further reveal its financial operations. This dimension is not accessible for investigation. According to reports, the organization maintains substantial investments in banking, finance, and real estate. According to Donzé, they may be earning more from this than from the watches themselves. Whatever transpires at Rolex remains at Rolex. Additionally, The Dark Days of the War is a chapter in Donzé's book. The British government suspected Wilsdorf, the company's proprietor, of collaborating with the Nazis in 1941. The Count of Geneva concluded that Wilsdorf was an ardent admirer of Hitler's regime after conducting an investigation. Donzé declares, "I was taken aback by this discovery." He was interested in learning more about it, but he was unable to locate any documents from the Geneva police archives that pertain to this period. It appears that this group of files was not saved. There may have been an excessive number of prominent individuals in Geneva who maintained connections with the Nazi regime and Vichy France. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and drop a comment below to let us know what you think.